Hello and welcome to the 7-Second Offense podcast. My name's Theo. This is Cody. Say hello to the people.
Hello, people.
Yes, I love it. This has been a long time coming, very first episode, and there might be some hiccups. There might be some unique moments. Our video might cut because we had to edit something out, but just bear with us because you are on the journey with us as we continue to understand more about our lives and ourselves while we process with you.
Am I supposed to talk?
Hey, so the 7-second offense, that's going to be a tongue twister for the entirety of this podcast. The 7-Second Offense podcast is a podcast about conversations that have changed the way we think about the world. And we'll get into that. But before that, Cody, introduce yourself to the people. Who is Cody Bender?
Cody Bender. I would say I'm a self-proclaimed entrepreneur. Within the last year, I launched an insurance firm, so still trying to get that off the ground and have the ball rolling smooth. But other than that, I would say I'm a lover of all things. Anywhere from the Breakfast Club. Big Charlemagne fan. Love rap culture, fashion, sports. Essentially what I'm trying to say is I love anything besides Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors. And if you have a problem with that, you could drop your email in the reviews and let's debate.
Do you know who has a problem with that? Every second to third grade boy who wears neon Nike Elite socks and their Golden State shirt.
Absolutely.
And and has no idea who Dennis Rodman is. All those guys.
Right.
They just tuned out.
2015 to now, new basketball fans.
True.
Diehard Steph Curry fans.
Which, listen, if you have a problem with that, wait for 5 minutes because we're about to come at you with why we have a problem with the Warriors. So there we go, Cody. My name's Theo. I am a high school pastor in Arizona. Lived in Phoenix for about 3 years now. And have lived kind of all over. Was born in Costa Rica. Can speak Spanish fairly well. Español. Por los personas que pueden entenderme.
That's
Bienvenidos.
Hot. That is hot.
Thank you. I've been wanting to start a podcast for a very long time. I feel like everybody our age is starting a podcast.
Right.
I see memes about, every 25-year-old white kid is now owning of a podcast, which praise Jesus that you're able to bring diversity to the group.
Come on.
But I think that first off, we got to get it out of the way. 7-second offense. A lot of people probably don't know what that is. Tell us a little bit about it, Cody.
Yeah, so 7-second offense was, you could look at Mike D'Antoni as a pioneer to basketball in general, right?
Right.
He created this offense. He was looking at who goes down as one of the greatest point guards ever, Steve Nash.
Right. There you go.
And you have, the photo. You have a undeveloped, but one of the most athletic big men in the league, Amari Stoudemire.
Yep.
And he's looking at the rest of the roster and he goes, I'm going to go against the grain.
Yeah.
And I'm going to create this offense where we are shooting the ball statistically every 7 seconds. Now, I don't think that was the initial game plan.
Right.
But when you go through numbers, that's the reality of what it was.
Right.
And so their offense was to win championships, which goes against everything, right? Defense wins championships. Well, Mike D'Antoni, his whole theology was of complete opposite.
Well, and the interesting thing, too, is you have the Detroit Pistons with Rasheed and Ben Wallace, who are the Twin Towers. Right. But that was a defensive-minded team.
With Chauncey, who was locking every point guard
up.
True.
That team, which granted, we played them a lot back in those years, and I low-key loved the Detroit Pistons teams. Yeah. But you had them. You have, the Lakers in, 05, I think, was the last year that Shaq was with them. Right. But again, Shaq was Shaq.
Yeah.
So, but again, defensive, team. And so I think this was the first time we saw in the entire NBA a team that was trying, like you said, to win with offense.
Right.
Which now you get into the era of the Golden State of the world.
Right.
Really, this was so ahead of its time.
Right.
And was Golden State before Golden State was Golden State.
But Golden State gets all the credit for what Mike D'Antoni and the Phoenix Suns created.
Exactly. Well, and I'm sure we'll talk about, listen, we're big Suns guys, okay? I'm sure we'll talk about this in another podcast episode, but Steve Kerr was the GM of the Suns at the time.
Talk to him.
And ended up going to Golden State. There's a kind of controversy around a potential draft night trade between the Warriors and the Suns for Steph Curry specifically. Nobody fully knows what happened, but we were at one time supposed to get him. And when we didn't, that's really when Steve Kerr started to move out. There's some other things at play with that. But dude, they were the Golden State Warriors before the Warriors were the Warriors.
Yeah. I remember in our world, right? You were almost at church, it seemed, every single day.
Mhm.
And I remember every Wednesday night, my pops would pull us out of service, almost it seemed like early.
Yeah.
So he could get the 60 West flying 80 miles an hour.
Yeah.
I'm like 9 years old, maybe in 5th grade, just so we could catch the fourth quarter, 5 minutes left, or whatever the Phoenix Suns were doing, whether it was a blowout or a close game.
Yeah.
They created an atmosphere that was so fun to watch that you wanted to be a part of it.
Totally. And when I wasn't even here in Phoenix, like at the time, I lived in Orange County, so everybody was Lakers fans.
Right.
So it was like, Kobe all the way.
Okay.
And so much of me was like, dude, Kobe's the worst.
Right.
Especially in so that picture that's right there is from which I don't even know if I can say that now. The Kobe's past is kind of like
R.I.P.
But anyways, that picture there is from 2010, and we swept the Spurs in that series, and then went on to the Western Conference Finals to play Kobe. And there's that was the iconic, like, I say play Kobe because it's like the Lakers were Kobe,
right.
But that was the series that he like hit that, I think it was like a buzzer beater 3 and comes back down half court and like fist bumps. And I just remember, like, I'm sure I cried.
Yeah, absolutely. He takes his jersey, right? Everyone knows it, and he pulls it to the side so you see his pec.
Bro,
one of the most iconic moments in sports.
It's sad because as a Suns fan, I literally have framed
right
like us not even winning the NBA Finals. I'm like, first round, we swept the Spurs. Right. Frame that and put it on my wall. Like, it's so whack.
Yeah, it is. It's hard being a Suns fan.
Yeah.
But there's a few of us left who could call ourselves fans.
Right. But all that to say, that is really the genesis of the podcast name. Because 7-second offense changed the NBA forever. People say the Warriors did, but the Suns were really the ones that set the blueprint of like, hey, this is what it could look like. And then the Warriors just took it to the next level.
Yeah.
And for us, this podcast is a place for us to talk about conversations or ideas that change the way we look at the world. And I think that's like really anything that changes the way that we see life, we see really anything.
Right.
That's kind of what we want to bring up and talk about a little bit.
Yeah.
And so we're going to get into one of those conversations here a little bit more. But as you can tell, we're passionate Suns fans, and we need an outlet to talk about the sport. Want to get into the most controversial. I posted it because it happened 2007 was when it took place, but it was this month. We're recording in May. It was like May 15th or something.
Right.
I think it actually was. The fact that I just threw that out, I'm pretty sure it was actually May 15th. I posted about it that morning. I said the biggest NBA controversy of all time. Now I'm biased, but
no, I don't think it's biased at all.
But there's a lot in this series that happened, like so many different layers that happened, that I think it's not just like a one narrative story. So we're going to talk a little bit about really what everybody remembers the Spurs Sun series for right now.
Right.
But there's probably another episode we'll do on some of the back half of it, okay? So we'll put a video up, and I'm going to pull it up here if you aren't familiar with this series. But it's game 4, okay? I'm sure at the time, I think this was the first year that Amari was on the Suns? First or second?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
It was close to the beginning.
Yeah,
maybe
absolutely.
I'm making that up, but it was close to the beginning. The Suns that season, like, were so dominant. And coming against the Spurs, who at the time, that's another thing. I hate the Spurs, like, with everything in me.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you look back at that Spurs team, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Tim Duncan, that team was unreal.
Even throw out Bruce Bowen.
Yeah, Bruce Bowen, which that dude.
Dirty.
But great defender.
Absolutely.
3-and-D, again, probably before 3-and-D was a thing, because people didn't want to shoot three balls. But anyways, toward the end of game 4, okay, I think the series maybe is tied at the time. Don't fully remember because I try to block out this series from my mind. Steve Nash rebounds the ball, goes to the scorer's table. Robert Horry went on to play for the Lakers too, which probably makes this even worse. Literally, like, not like a prison foul into the scorer's table. And then, like, pandemonium just ensues. Like, I remember just seeing that and trying to process, like, what just happened.
What just happened?
Like, I mean, and the thing too is I'm sure here, like everybody's talking about it, obviously.
Right.
But I'm in Orange County, like nobody even seems to like care.
No kidding.
It
wasn't even conversation.
I mean, people were like, oh, you see that foul? It was like kind of sketch. But like, dude, which I think it was the game before, Steve Nash broke his nose. I don't even remember who broke it because it happened so many times. He's like bleeding on his face, still hitting threes because Steve is the G. But like already broke his nose the game before. He has like a literal bandage on his face. And then Robert Horry does that. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a lot of reasons why this was so bad. But the biggest of reasons is that what ends up happening is that David Stern looks at the situation. Okay, I think Robert Horry got ejected. Well, in fact, I know he got ejected. I don't remember if any of the Suns players got ejected. I don't think so, but I remember for sure he got ejected, and then he was suspended the next game. Mm-hmm. What you end up looking back, and I'm sure we have footage of this going right now above us, but you look at like the actual like fight that happens, because obviously if you're playing basketball and get punched in the face, I'm going to go over to try to protect you.
Absolutely.
Because I'm a good teammate.
Right.
So you look at like the actual like pandemonium that ensues, and first off, Robert Horry just walks away because he's the worst person. Robert, if you're watching this, sorry. Anyways, and Raja Bell obviously gets into it. The other guys that were on the court get into it. Mm-hmm. Okay? Interestingly enough, though, who don't you see there? The answer is Amari Stoudemire and Boris Diaw. Don't see them anywhere near the fight that's going on, anywhere near the action. Okay?
You can't find one clip, of Boris walking onto the court.
Right. Which I'm glad you said that, because I will bring up for those that are watching on YouTube. And if you're listening to this, you can look it up later. You can find it on YouTube and stuff. But for those of you that are watching this, you'll see in just a moment. But you don't see Amari or Boris around. What ends up happening, though, is David Stern, because David Stern just wants power over the situation. I don't fully understand. He ends up suspending Amari Stoudemire and Boris Diaw for Game 5.
Which is a huge game.
It's the turning point game.
Right.
Now, remember, we are a basketball team that runs the court. We don't post up. We don't do anything. We're playing against Tim Duncan. Okay? So the only like real people that we can match up against Tim Duncan are Stoudemire and Diaw. And they're already like smaller than him. So to lose both of our like power forward, center, big men guys, and the only guy we have is Kirk Thomas, who like, Kirk's a good dude.
No, he balled out on the Suns, but he's not the guy.
He did. He was pretty old, I think, at the time.
Had to,
Grandpa Kirk.
Yeah, Grandpa for sure.
But I mean, like, for him to be your only guy against Tim Duncan, one of the greatest centers of all time.
And I would disagree, but you could argue the greatest.
True.
One could, right?
Yeah, I mean, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the way that, anyways, that's a whole nother conversation. But to be the only guy to go against Tim Duncan, there's no way that we're going to win that game. Okay?
Right.
Now, this is what I was talking about that I want to pull up. Okay? If you fast forward in this video, we'll pull it up on the screen. Okay. That's Amari Stoudemire right there. You see that? That's Amari. The fight's over here. This is as close as he gets to the actual action. Literally, he's not even on the court. Mm-hmm. One of his feet is on the court. Okay? One could argue. I say one. I'm not arguing this. But one could argue. The real fault of this whole thing is the fact that we're trying to make money off of a sport where guys just put a little ball into a hoop. And if we took out one row of seats, backed the bench up, so that I have more than like half of a foot to stand up, he's not even running on the court anymore. But those guys literally, like, it's like you stand up and you have to like shimmy sideways to like even get on the court.
Yeah, you're 7. All these guys are 6 feet.
Yeah.
6'5" and above.
Bro, you can't get in the back of my Ford Escape when you're a basketball player, yet somehow they have less room than a Ford Escape on the basketball court.
Right.
Okay? Gets ejected for that. Boris Diaw gets ejected. We go on to lose.
Yeah, just leave it to what Amari. I mean, he says it. I was going to Nash to check on my brother, who was just hip checked.
Yeah.
to see if he was all right.
Yeah.
Words of Amari. And the video evidence shows no different.
Right. Ridiculous.
It's
We
something
have,
else.
okay, I have this is how I would have handled it. Okay. I don't know if I think I've told you this. This is how I would have handled
Let's
it.
hear it.
I'm Mike D'Antoni. Well, I'm not, but in this case.
Right.
Okay. It's 2007. It's the off season. I get the whole team together, sit them down in the off season, say, hey guys, thanks for coming. Good job. Probably don't say that part, but you know. Here's what's going to happen. This year we're going to go back to the playoffs. We dominated last season in the regular season. Going to do literally the same thing. Okay? Trust me though. We're going to face the Spurs again, and when we do, don't worry about it. I've got it figured out. Okay? So they're fine. They go have a great offseason. Then I go to the local prison, okay, here in Arizona. Just any of them. Just find a prison. And then I find the sketchiest looking dude I can, okay? Just super sketchy. I don't profile people, but this dude, like, universally, everybody's like, okay, yeah. Even he looks in the mirror and he's like, yeah, I'm kind of scared.
Sketch.
Okay? I find he's, like, kind of close to getting out of prison. I say, hey, when you get out, you call me, okay? You want to be on a basketball team? I got you.
Say no more.
Yeah. He gets out. I give him a contract, 1-year contract. That's it. And I say, your job is to sit on the bench and do nothing. Okay? Whole regular season goes by. He just chills on the bench. Everybody's like, yo, who's that super sketch dude on the bench? It's like number, I don't know, 88. Okay? That's who he is. Just don't worry about it. He just sits there. That's all he does. Okay? We get back to play the Spurs the next season because, again, it's going to happen.
Absolutely.
Game 1. Okay? Amari Stoudemire, or just really anybody, is just going to, like, the game's going to start. They're going to blow the whistle. Center tip is going to happen. Tim Duncan jumps in the air, and while he's in the air, Amari's just going to punch him in the stomach. Okay? And then I just look at my sketch guy, and I'm like, here's what I want you to do. I want you to just go out there and start beating up people. Okay? So he's just going to stand up and just start doing what he did to get into prison in the first place.
Right.
And then, of course, because they aren't crazy, all of the Spurs players are going to get up off the bench and they're going to all try to go help because this behemoth is beating up Tim Duncan. And then I'm just going to run up to all of them and say, you're ejected, you're ejected, you're ejected, you're ejected, you're ejected. And then we're going to go on to win by forfeit because all of their players were ejected. And the only person that was ejected on my team was the literal prisoner that we had before.
Right. And everyone who's listening is saying, no, that's so extreme of a story. The reality is it's not, because that's exactly what happened.
Exactly.
Except homeboy is
minus
just
the prison part.
And a champion already. But
and he also won like 3 finals. But all I'm saying is it would work.
Yeah. What's sickening is this. You could go back to footage, which they will never ever on NBA TV. Not once have they ever replayed this series.
Well, and isn't the series, granted I didn't look for the podcast, but isn't like most of the series like
gone?
Buried in YouTube.
Right. In the first half, Tim Duncan walks off the bench and goes to the free throw line from the bench and is not suspended. We could honestly do about a 3-episode segment on this series of everything, not leaving any, and people already have.
Right.
But from there, it's just like our own opinion and takes on it.
Right.
But that's how controversial this series is.
Right.
And the weight that it holds and will, I think, forever hold.
Right. And I think, and granted, now this is like getting really into basketball. If you're fans of like Zach Lowe, Bill Simmons, they talk about like how they're just going to buy the Suns and like, you know, be the GMs and then like take us to actually win a finals. I think a lot of that conversation is because of this series, because people realize how ridiculous it was.
Yeah.
Which, because we're going to go on, and I don't want to belabor the point too much, we'll probably do another podcast episode on Tim Donaghy, like together.
Mm-hmm.
Donaghy, whatever, how you say it. But that summer, one of the refs from this series, I think he refed game, I don't remember, but he refed one of the games.
One too many.
Yeah. He is arrested for betting on games and sentenced to prison. He goes to like for a certain like amount of time in prison, gets out of prison, and he's like, hey, I never did that. Like this is what he says. He says he bet on games, but he says that it didn't affect the way that he refed the games that he refed. So basically he says like he wasn't biased. So the NBA conducts an investigation, mind you, led by the same man that suspended Boris Stoudemire, leads an investigation. And in the investigation, basically the NBA concludes he's right. He wasn't biased, right? So they kind of like put it away. Everybody's happy, whatever. However, Phil Sculla, who is the FBI official that actually like basically uncovered this whole thing, he's like, nah, I don't think that's how it goes. I think there's something a little sketch about this Donaghy guy, right? I don't even know if he's from New York, but I just kind of felt right. He says in one of the interviews that they had with him, he said any NBA executives were too eager to move on from the investigation. He went on to do a separate investigation, the FBI did, and basically there were 40 games that he officiated, 10 of which were blowouts. So we're looking at 30 competitive games. Of the 30 competitive games, 23 of those games favored the team heavily that he was betting on. So that's 77%. I forget what the likelihood of that is, but it's like 6,000 to 1. We're talking about the FBI. But because the NBA closed their investigation, the FBI is like, whatever, it doesn't matter. They close it too. Nobody talks about it anymore.
Footage is gone.
Yeah. And I think I was telling you this too. I'm in like, what, 7th grade at the time? Yeah, 7th grade, I think. And I remember literally my little naive self, my little white naive self who like has never been like oppressed in my life. I'm like watching like basketball, and I remember being like, that wasn't a foul. I don't think that was, but I'm like, but surely the NBA referee is going to be telling the truth.
Right. Yep.
And then I remember like looking back at this whole thing, and I'm like, wait, what? Like the guy that is supposed to enact justice, and this literally like unlocked, like my whole worldview as a 7th grader is like crumbling before me as I realize like the world's corrupt and the Suns, like the NBA hates the Suns, and we're never going to win a basketball game.
Yeah, he goes on Clutch Sports, I believe it is, has a good article on this.
Yeah.
And Donahue, however you pronunciate it, he says the lead ref, they would do pregame analysis and watch footage.
Right.
And he would say, this is what we are going to call, so look for this, and this is what we are going to let slide by. And he claims it always favored the Spurs in that series.
Oh.
We should link.
That we'll link a bunch of this stuff down in the show notes below. But yeah, man, I don't fully I think like the thing for me is that like, granted, of course I care about Suns basketball, so I'm like always going to care about this stuff. But I think the thing for me that's frustrating is that like nobody seems to really talk about it anymore. Cause it's like Steve Nash is like the most saintly man of all time. So he like never expresses his opinions.
Right.
Because he's like so like, media guy, which is great. That's why we love him. One of the reasons. But nobody seems to care except for Phoenix. And it's not like Phoenix is like a mega city, so the world just doesn't get to, the Lakers of the world just continue to be the Lakers.
But there's people like us who will bring it back up and shove it in people's faces, whether they want to hear it or not.
Yeah.
And that's why 7-second offense exists.
Yeah. This is actually just propaganda.
Yeah.
We've been hired by the Phoenix Suns to like propagate like organically in the community the justice of, or injustice of.
So our tickets could go from $5 to $7.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, let's not talk about recent Phoenix Suns basketball. Devin Booker, please stay in Phoenix. Dear God, please stay in Phoenix. Yeah, so anyways, well, I mean, there's a whole bunch of other stuff, but I think a lot of that like conversation does really kind of point back to the fact that the Suns did change basketball. And I think the reason people don't talk about it is because they never won a finals, which makes a lot of sense. But those exact same ideologies were carried into the Warriors, and then the Warriors obviously went on to like beat the Warriors.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk about all of that stuff because I think it segues or leads us into the probably more important topic. I say probably because, the other topic is important, but the probably more important topic, or at least the topic that matters to more people, which is the idea of creating through criticism. Because I think it's a topic that's prevalent for a lot of people, I would say especially the millennial generation. Yeah. Okay. Not to dive in too deep, and I'm definitely not an expert on the topic, but Gen Z is like more of a generation that just kind of takes charge and creates. Mm-hmm. Whereas millennials definitely are more hesitant because we care about perfection more.
Dreams without action.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And Gen Z is like one of the traits that people like identify them as is they have dreams, but they just silently try to achieve them and then just like skyrocket from there. Whereas millennials are like, yo, I have the biggest dream on the planet. I'm going to change the world. And then we just go watch Netflix for like 5 hours.
To run from it instead of. Yeah.
Exactly. So that said, I think especially for our millennial generation, but I would say that it probably applies cross-generationally, this idea of creating through what could be criticism. So I think this podcast and like the fact that we're starting this podcast, a lot of it is right in the face of that. So talk to me about, at least for you, like what's been the process of like even getting to where we're at right now with starting this thing, at least as criticism is concerned, or how is criticism factored into like starting something like this?
Yeah. So I think coming to you, we've probably sat on this for a while now.
Mm-hmm.
And if it wasn't or isn't a podcast, it was something else.
Totally.
Of dreaming big, and then through life being busy, distance between you and I and where we live now,
Right.
Have ran from what we were essentially facing or dreaming.
Right.
And so I really had to just stand in the mirror and look at the Gen Zs.
Yeah.
And say, I want to learn from you.
Totally.
I want to dream big, but then put actions to it. And so it's been a lot of internal conflict.
Yeah.
One, I'm not enough.
Yeah.
Two, I'm a perfectionist, right? So, and I'm a 9 on the Enneagram. And if you're familiar with the Enneagram, great. If you're not, another conversation, right?
Yeah.
So in fear and trying to be perfect, I run from creativity. So I've prisoned a side of me that I want to let out.
Right.
And I'm at this point now, and we had conversations of let's move forward and let's do this. And honestly, yes, we're just talking about a podcast, but this is a timestamp of my life where I'm truly believing that the trajectory of where I'm going is changing.
Yeah.
That's
good.
I'm no longer going to allow myself to be prisoned by fear.
Yeah.
And then not to go and create.
Yeah.
So that's kind of.
Well, and that's so good. And I think you, like, what you're saying in essence is that criticism can come internally just as much as externally.
Right.
And in fact, at least I would say probably for me, and I'd say probably the same for you, is that like, maybe let's frame it this way. I think that obviously once you're successful, like the issue is external criticism for most of us. Sometimes it's in like external criticism, whether it's a parent or like a close friend. But a lot of times external criticism isn't an issue until you have followers. Like, who's going to criticize you if you just aren't doing anything that matters?
Right.
I think, I mean, I've heard it everywhere, but it's the whole idea of like, if you don't want to be criticized, don't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But I think the biggest hump to get over for especially millennials, but people in general, is the internal criticism at first. And it's like the voice inside my head that's telling me all the reasons why I shouldn't do something.
Yep.
Versus like anybody else that would be telling me anything. And I think it's like, it definitely is something that this podcast, at least for both of us, is like you're saying, a timestamp that says, hey, I'm just going to go for it. And ironically, I'm getting over the internal criticism. And now if this ever gets any sort of followers, now we're going to have to figure out how to do the external criticism.
Right, step into that and then walk over it.
Which is also so funny because we're like, yeah, dude, criticism doesn't even bother me now. Yet we literally bought boom stands so that we could look cool on a camera.
Facts.
So I mean, like,
did we or did we not Windex our MacBooks?
100%. Like, bro, if I have an unclean MacBook, can you imagine the scenes? Can you imagine what they would say about me?
Would you just look at that?
Would you just look at that? Yeah. So I mean, like, by no means.
Work in progress.
Yeah, by no means have we figured it out.
Absolutely not.
But I think, like, for both of us.
But we're putting ourselves in positions to figure it out.
Totally. And I think, like you said, and where I'm at a point in my life where it's like, for so long, I haven't done things because I'm scared of what's going to happen. What if I don't do it? What if it doesn't work?
Mm-hmm.
Especially because I dream big.
Right.
Whether that's because I'm a millennial or just because that's who I am, whatever.
Right.
And I think I'm at a point where I'm like, if I'm ever going to achieve any of that stuff, I just got to go for it. And I'm 26 years old. So I'm sure some people look at this and they're like, oh, he's still young. I mean, I would look at it and say, probably late to the game.
Late to the game. That's how I feel. I love what you're saying.
Yeah.
On the Breakfast Club, Jay-Z is talking about Kanye, and I think this is like 2013.
Yeah.
It's like an hour and a half interview.
Yeah.
And Jay-Z is just dropping bars after bars of just like, honestly, some life-changing, like, I like that, I like that, I like that. And he talks about Kanye.
Mm-hmm.
And he looks at Kanye and he describes him as this. He says, Kanye is the cowboy who actually wrote it down. He says, one second.
You're good. You said this is 2013?
2013. Okay. Kanye is the cowboy of the culture. He runs over to the hill, and over the hill he sees the Indians who hit him with bow and arrows, and he takes all the shots. He runs back to the industry and he says, they're over there. But hey, now we could go and we could conquer.
Yo.
So not necessarily that we're in this to conquer and destroy, right?
Yeah.
But it's that mentality of I'm going to go.
Yeah.
And I'm going to pursue creativity, and I'm going to be the first one to do it.
Totally.
Whatever it is. And I'm not going to run from that.
Totally. Well, and it's not like it's not like we're like doing something that like is revolutionary.
Right.
Like literally everybody has podcasts now, I feel like.
Everybody, especially during this time.
Yeah. We're, the midst of a virus where it's like, this is literally all we can do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like you're saying, like Kanye is so much that person that like, he's literally always on the fringe. But because of that, everybody has an opinion of him. And it's like, you could literally never listen to one of his songs. You still got an opinion about Kanye West. But I think he's at a point where he's like, everybody's going to criticize me somehow. I'm not going to be perfect in anybody's eyes. So as long as like I'm true to who I feel that I should be. And I think that's really what like the biggest hindrance or like the biggest, like the saddest thing of this whole thing is like by us not creating or by us not actually like going for it, we aren't even like operating as who we should be. You know what I mean? Like we know that we know that we can do it. We know that like I can make a podcast, I can talk about whatever the thing is. But it's like literally not only am I not doing it because I'm too scared, but I'm also like operating under who I think like I can be and who like
that's good.
I should be, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's like what the hardest part of it is. And I think, to segue, and maybe this is kind of the last thought, as I was processing through this, I think what it comes down to is when you're concerned with the crowd, you're going to care about the criticism. But when you're concerned about the individual, you care about the impact. And I think like, even in this podcast, like if I'm just trying to get numbers, I'm going to care about every little thing every person says.
Right.
But when I care about like each individual person and recognize that each individual person is going to receive this content a specific way, like I'm going to care about the impact that it has on their life. So even if we like do this and somebody criticizes us, that criticism isn't just like a number anymore. It's a person.
Yep.
But the criticism doesn't negatively affect me as much because I'm like, I understand like this is coming from somebody's story. This is like, this has an impact on their life. I want to address where they're at. Where I think what can end up happening if you go too far the other direction is that you just care about the crowd. And it's like somebody can criticize you and you're like, shut up, hater. And you like try to like push them out of your life. But like what they're saying isn't all that wrong. Yeah. And so you have to come to a place where you're like, I don't care about numbers as much as I care about the individual. I mean, I've heard it said before, like we count people because people count. So like numbers matter because I care about people. But I think it's like, if that's all I care about, I'm just going to try to either like, I'm going to get inundated by criticism that I can't handle it, or I'm going to shut it all out that I'm not going to learn from it. And I think when it's like you care about the individual, it's like I can take the criticism and understand like it's coming from a specific place. So even though maybe not all of it is like accurate, there's still like some truth to it, and I can actually try to grow from it and like become a better person by it.
Right. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. So all that to say, we're really pioneering new grounds. And I mean, I think we're the Kanye West of the podcasting game.
I accept that.
I
think that'll preach.
Said like every white kid ever. But yeah, I think this is, like I said at the beginning of the episode, this is a journey that we're going on, and we're going to get much more comfortable with it. And I'm sure footage will change and boom stands will come and go. But at the end of the day, like we want to get content out.
Yeah.
Because we care about, at the end of the day, we care about the individual.
Right.
And hopefully something we say in any of this will have some sort of impact on somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And if anything, it'll start conversations that can, hopefully, people's perspectives can change the same way that our perspective has changed.
Absolutely. No matter what you're doing, right?
Totally. And there's so much more to say about this, but I think we're going to wrap it up. So thanks for tuning in to the 7 Second Offense podcast. I have to like slow down every time I say it because I feel
It's
like
a tongue twister.
it's a tongue twister for sure.
SSO.
Yes. But hey, if you're watching this on YouTube, like, subscribe, comment. If you're watching it on podcast, leave us a review and share this with whoever you can, because we're going to be doing this hopefully once a week. We'll see what happens. I mean, at the end of the day, if we don't and somebody tries to criticize us, shut up, hater, because we don't even care about you. So that's really all that matters. But no, thanks for tuning in. We will catch you on the next episode of 7 Second Offense.
It's a wrap. First episode. How do you feel?
Fantastic.